Hello, and welcome to the John Ark Show. Today, we're going to interview astronaut Terry Virts. He has been the commander of both the United States Space Shuttle and the International Space Station and has spent more than 6 months in outer space. Before we begin, I want to encourage you to subscribe, like, comment, and follow us. Also, remember to click on the notification bell so that you can be notified every time we upload a new episode. We've got some great celebrity interviews coming up, as well as fantastic news stories. We look forward to your continued watching. Also, I'd like to tell you about a service called HollywoodIsCalling.com. It's a great service that allows you to purchase live phone calls from your favorite celebrities, so check them out. It's something you can buy for yourself or as a gift for someone you care about. We've got over 100 celebrities to choose from. A live 15-second celebrity phone call is $19.95, and a live 30-second celebrity phone call is $29.95. So give it a try. HollywoodIsCalling.com. Now, let's say hello to astronaut Terry Virts. Hi, Terry, and welcome to the John Ark Show. How are you today, sir?
Doing well. How's it going?
Excellent. Thank you. So, other than perhaps surgeons who routinely save lives on the operating table, I cannot think of many careers more impressive or difficult to accomplish than being a United States astronaut. And I say that with all sincerity. What is your perspective on that now that you look back on all you've achieved?
I don't look at it so much as like this personal achievement as I do having had the honor of doing something amazing. Excuse me. The chance to fly in space is so unique. I mean, so very few people. One day we were all having dinner. There were 6 of us on the space station, and you could see out the hatch in the Russian segment. We were looking at Earth, and I said, guys, there's 6 of us here, and there's over 6 billion down there. We're literally 1 in a billion. And so it was really just an honor to be there, more than an achievement.
When I was a little boy, I used to love watching the original Star Trek with William Shatner playing Captain Kirk. Mm-hmm. Years later, as a producer, when I met the real William Shatner to discuss a project, I told him that my love of aviation and aerospace all came from seeing him in those early Star Trek episodes. Now, he told me that he's constantly told the same thing by pilots and astronauts all over the world. What was it that sparked your interest in aviation and aerospace?
I love Star Trek. Of course, I really love Star Wars. I was a Star Wars kid.
Yeah.
But the first book I read was about Apollo. I was in kindergarten and I read this little cardboard kindergartner book, and I was hooked. I grew up with pictures of airplanes and galaxies and space, and that's what covered my wall, plus football and baseball. But I just love sports. I love sports. I love space at a young age, and it was always there for me. And I saw an IMAX movie called To Fly at the National Air and Space Museum, and that was like blew my mind. It came out in 1976, and I had to fly after I saw that.
Yeah, I can imagine. As a child, I remember watching the Apollo flights to the moon and being so impressed by that. This year, when SpaceX put some astronauts into orbit, it was very interesting for me because basically I was watching the entire event with the eyes of an adult and also with the eyes of a child because, I used to watch the Apollo flights with my father. So it was a very interesting duality.
Right.
What did you think and feel as you were watching that manned SpaceX flight earlier this year?
Honestly, my main feeling was it's about time. It's been a long time in coming. The space shuttle program ended in 2011, and that was a long time without America able to launch people. And it's great. I mean, it's amazing. And it was done mostly by SpaceX. They had some help from NASA, but that's amazing. But I'm just glad that we finally have the ability to launch people into orbit again. We had that ability in 1961 with John Glenn, and it took us until 2020 to get a chance to do it again. So that in itself, just getting someone into orbit is not the purpose of our space program. It's going to the moon, going to Mars, doing these other bigger things. And that ability to get people off the planet and back to the planet is like a cog in the logistical wheel. It's just you got to be able to do that. But there's much bigger things that we want to do now. In 1961, it was just get them in orbit. But now there's a lot bigger things that we want to do.
Hmm. I really love how Elon Musk's partnership with NASA is taking spaceflight to the next level.
Yeah.
It seems this partnership is moving really fast and it's really productive. I love how transparent he is. Both Elon Musk and other people are routinely, weekly, almost daily posting videos on YouTube of what they observe happening at SpaceX, the assembly of the various spacecrafts, the pre-flight tests. All of that stuff is all online for everybody to watch. What are your thoughts on the partnership between NASA and SpaceX?
Well, I think the key to the future of space exploration is a public-private partnership. If you look at the government's job is not to do exciting and innovative things. The government's job is to exist and to get more money and to have more jobs in their congressional district. And so the governments, by definition, are not going to be that innovative. The Apollo is like this really bright spot, but in general, that's not the goal. So, if NASA can figure out how to do public-private partnerships where you fund people like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and others, there's a lot of other really exciting, smaller name space startups, then let them be innovative, because the government can always just print more money and keep jobs in their congressional districts. But private companies can't do that. Like they need to make their stuff and have it work, or they go out of business. And so that fire is a healthy thing. Competition is a good thing. And so I think it's exciting. And that's where America is best. A lot of countries have governments. I mean, but what America has much better than most places is an innovative, forward-thinking, hardworking tech sector. And that's where our strength is.
You mentioned Jeff Bezos. I really haven't been tracking his efforts as much as I've been tracking Elon's.
That's on purpose.
Yeah. Now, are you very aware of what he's doing, or are you guys primarily focused on what Elon's accomplishing?
Oh, no. So look, Elon and Jeff are kind of Ford and Chevy. Elon is tweeting all the time. Like you said, he is the flamboyant, watch me, look at what I'm doing. He's selling shorts for Tesla, and they're $4.20 or whatever. So he likes this flamboyant, get out in the public. Jeff Bezos is just zip it, quiet, do things quietly. But Jeff Bezos is pretty well funded. If you haven't noticed, the man has some spare change in his couch. And that's an important thing for space programs. And he has built the most massive building at the Kennedy Space Center. I think it's bigger than the VAB, the big Saturn V space shuttle building. It is huge. There's a massive Blue Origin. And he's making these engines, these BE-4 engines, that are going to power 21st century rockets. They're super important. They're going to power his rockets, but they also may power other companies' rockets like the Vulcan. So Jeff Bezos is quiet. He's not a public flamboyant guy. He's just slowly advancing. One of my STS-130 crewmates is working on his rocket program, and they're doing amazing things. Bezos was the first guy to return the first stage and land it safely. The new Shepard, I think, rocket was the first one that came back and landed. It wasn't Elon, although that's a technology they both have.
So does Bezos also have a partnership with the U.S. government, or is that just Elon?
Bezos is working on it. So Elon is ahead. Elon is 5 or 10 years ahead of him.
Right.
But MySpace was the leading social network software, but you're not checking your MySpace account, right? So I'm not counting Jeff Bezos out. And he has a big building at the Marshall Space Flight Center in Alabama, which is home to important senators, and a lot of money flows there. So Bezos is playing the long game. He's definitely engaging with the government. He wants to start winning. It used to be Air Force. Now it's Space Force contracts to do DoD missions and 3-letter agency missions. And so Bezos is doing some big things. And at the end of the 21st century, I think Blue Origin is going to be a big player in the space industry.
So there's a space shuttle on display at the Smithsonian Museum at the Dulles Airport in Virginia. Mm-hmm. And when I saw it, I was amazed at how much it looks more like a glider than a spacecraft in person. When you were flying it, did it feel more like a spacecraft or a glider to you?
Well, it depends. During launch, it's a rocket. You can fly it manually during launch. Once you get in space, I flew it a lot. I did a bunch of maneuvers. I flew around the space station with the controls of Endeavour. It's a spaceship, but once it's back in the atmosphere, it's a glider. So it really is an amazing vehicle. For something to be a rocket and a spaceship and a glider is amazing. And as a test pilot, it was the best possible thing to fly. I mean, it was just awesome. I will always be thankful for being able to fly the shuttle.
Did it handle more like a commercial airliner or more like a very versatile jet?
It depends. In the pitch axis, it's really sensitive. If you do this, it pitches. But it's weird because it's a delta wing. So when you pull back on the stick, instead of climbing right away, it dumps lift, which drops it, and that increases the angle of attack, which makes it climb. So if you want to climb, you have to descend and then you start climbing. So you have to think 2 steps ahead of what you're doing, because if you're coming down to land and you want to pull up a little bit and you do this, you're going to smack it down on the runway. So it requires a special amount of training in pitch. But in roll, it was really sluggish. So it was like a fighter jet in pitch and like an airliner in roll, which is an interesting, we call that control harmony. You wouldn't want to sell these things to doctors and dentists to fly on the weekend.
See, those are the kind of details we love to hear. It's very interesting. So another thing that struck me about the space shuttle, standing in front of it, was that its technology was 40 years old when I saw it. When I watched the first space flight of the first manned flight of SpaceX's Demo 2 this year, I was surprised to see how spacious the interior of the capsule was. And also I was really surprised to see computer touchscreens. I was so accustomed to seeing the old spacecraft, very congested, mechanical dials, no room to adjust. What are your thoughts on the current designs?
Well, SpaceX is very sleek, white and blue, like the Boeing 787, right? But there are things that the crew can do, but there's nothing that the crew has to do. The crew can literally sit there, and then a few hours later or a day later after launch, they'll feel a thunk and they'll be at the space station. There's literally nothing to do. Everything is 100% automated. So that's good and bad. The test pilot in me, I want to fly, but it's also nice to be able to sit back and let the vehicle do its thing. But the space shuttle, if you look at the space shuttle cockpit, the switches and the dials and everything are Apollo. Like if you watch the Apollo 11 documentary or Apollo 13, the cockpit of the Apollo capsules and the lunar modules, it's the same font, it's the same switch dimensions, it's the same little metal rings on the switches. It's like you're in an Apollo, and the design is the same. There's 3 fuel cells. There's main bus A, Alpha Bravo Charlie. There's a lot of the details were the same. It was designed in the 70s. While Gene Cernan was on the moon, President Nixon called him up and said, "Hey, we're going to stop flying Apollo, but we're going to build a space shuttle." So the space shuttle program was born during Apollo. All the people that built Apollo built the space shuttle, and you really feel like you're in a Apollo capsule, except for it's 10 times as big.
By the way, are you on the East Coast or the West Coast?
I'm in Houston right now.
Okay. So, here at the Smithsonian, they also have, and I'm going off on a little tangent now, but they also have an SR-71.
Yes.
I love this plane. To me, it looks like a hybrid between a UFO and an aircraft. It is stunning looking in real person. So if you ever get a chance.
Designed in the 50s.
Yeah, amazing.
They didn't have these things. There was no iPhones.
And it is just a stunning work of art. I mean, aesthetically, technologically, everything about this thing is amazing. So if you're ever, near the Smithsonian and you haven't seen one, by all means, stop by and take a look at it.
Absolutely.
Another thing that I love about the partnership between NASA and SpaceX is how quickly it is evolving, modifying, improving the designs of the ships. There are a number of YouTube channels that chronicle all this. They document this as they go from iteration to iteration. And I really enjoy how transparent Elon is making the entire process. Elon and NASA. He seems determined to let the public enjoy the process as much as he does. Is this something that you track as well, or are you so inside it already that you're not really going to learn anything new by watching?
No. I think it's very instructive, the types of things that he tweets. And of course, he's tweeting his perspective. He's not tweeting both sides. But if he'll have a failure, he'll say, "Hey, look, the rocket failed." And rockets sometimes fail. So get over it. We're going to launch it again. So that's a great attitude to have. He doesn't shy away from the risk. This is a risky thing, and that's good because it is a risky endeavor. But I try not to follow Twitter too much. But it is interesting to see some of the stuff he posts.
I have a growing sense that SpaceX is going to allow America to once again dominate the Russians, and SpaceX and NASA's partnership, I should say, is once again going to allow America to dominate the Russians and the Chinese in the space race. I also think that's why the president created the U.S. Space Force. How familiar are you with the Space Force and what they're up to these days?
Well, I spent 16 years in Air Force Space Command, which it became Space Force. I wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post a couple years ago that the vice president retweeted. And so I was a big proponent of Space Force. I was standing about 10 feet in front of President Trump the day that he announced the moment he announced there was going to be a Space Force. So I wish they would have gone farther. It's still subordinate to the Air Force. It reports to the Secretary of the Air Force. It's still a part of the Air Force, but it's a step in the right direction for sure, because space is not air. It's not land. It's not sea. It's not air. It's space. In the same way, there's cyber. Cyber is not air or land or sea or space. So there's really 5 domains. The military calls them domains. And I think the smartest way to organize our military would be to have an air force, a land force, a sea force, and a space and a cyber force, so that the type of people who are computer nerds and they like hacking and they like writing code work for each other and they grow up to be the boss. And, so the kind of people that launch rockets grow up to be the boss, the kind of people that like to drive ships. And so I think it's a smart way to organize the military.
And, you mentioned cyber. Increasingly, cyber is dominated by satellites, which transmit the code and the signals around the Earth. So I think they're going to become, more united.
Absolutely. There's a case to be made for creating a space and cyber force, because right now there's Air Force Cyber Command, there's Army Cyber Command, there's Navy Cyber Command, and that to me doesn't make sense. It seems like an inefficient way, and we're spending so much money on defense that's not sustainable. So we need to figure out how to make things more efficient. And if we could figure out how to organize things better, I think cyber folks. I spent a little bit of time in Air Force Cyber Command, and the cyber personnel were frustrated that there's pilots in charge of them. And there's one pilot who's an amazing guy, one of the best leaders I've ever met, and he dove in heads first. But in general, pilots are not necessarily the smartest cyber people, and so we need to figure out how to properly organize, train, and equip cyber as well as space.
So for all those people out there who are dreaming of one day becoming an astronaut, just like you, can you walk us through the specific requirements and training necessary to become an astronaut? Give us a real sense for how challenging it is, both academically and physically.
I have the perfect book. Did you know this? Did we send this to you? How to Astronaut?
No.
Okay. This is my new book. It just came out a few weeks ago.
Excellent.
I broke it down. There's 51 short chapters in How to Astronaut, and I wrote it all aspects of space travel. Stuff you'd expect, like how do you launch? How do you fly a space shuttle? How do you build a space station? How do you do medical training? How do you fly jet? Kind of stuff you'd expect that astronauts do. And then some surprising things like, what would you do if your crewmate died? What do you do with a dead body? Or is time travel real? Or are there aliens? And so I kind of broke the book down, and it's not technical at all. I use lots of NASA acronyms and I make fun of all of them. So it's like a fun, read it at the beach, put it on your nightstand and just read a chapter at night. They're all short, very short chapters. So I wrote that book perfectly for the person who wants to be an astronaut, How to Astronaut.
Nice. How many people do you think apply for the space program each year? And
well,
of those people, how many actually get to fly a spacecraft at the end?
Right. So I left NASA a couple of years ago, and my last job there was helping them go through the applicants. And I think they told us they had 18,000 applicants. And I went through over 5,000 engineering applicants, people who were engineers. So there's a lot of people that apply. 12 people, I think, got picked for that class. So, the odds aren't great, but here's the thing. If you don't apply, your odds are 0. So don't tell yourself no. That's my message.
12 out of 18 succeeded?
18,000.
12 out of 18,000 succeeded?
Yeah. Yeah.
That is amazing. So, what is usually the filter that kills most people? Is it mathematical aptitude? Is it engineering background? Is it their athletic ability?
Well, I'll tell you, about a third of those applications didn't have their college transcripts uploaded or some basic thing. They literally, a third of those 18,000 didn't even get forwarded because they didn't fill out the government. It's like usajobs.gov is you have to go to the government website. So just getting your application done gives you a leg up on a third of the people. And then, there's a basic, you need a strong academic background in math or science or engineering or medicine, something like that. And then you need to have done well in your career. They're not looking for just recent college grads. And then they're looking for people with operational experience. So the military test pilots that apply, they have operational experience. They check that box. But the scientists who apply, NASA doesn't necessarily want the smartest PhD in some obscure physics thing who just writes on blackboards all day long. They want someone who can stay cool while the rocket is launching or while you're out on a spacewalk or something like that. So I think aviation is the most important skill to have. Things like mountain climbing are good. I remember there was this one lady who had been a NASCAR mechanic. And when I saw that stood out, and I moved that application to let's take a look at this one further. So some type of operational experience. And then you have to come down there and you get a really in-depth medical exam. And so if you have medical problems, that's not going to work. And some people have problems they didn't know. They get along just fine in life, but NASA really digs and digs and digs. And then it comes down to once you've gone from 18,000 down to about 50 to 100, then you interview, and then it just comes down to, do they like you or not? Do they want to spend 6 months on a space station with you or not? Because they don't want the arrogant loudmouth, or super shy. Like they just want people that they can. You think about it. If you had to spend 6 months with somebody, and you had 18,000 applicants, you could probably find 10 who you wouldn't mind spending some time with. So that's kind of the process from top to bottom.
Yeah, attitude is everything, no matter what your career. No matter
right, that's right.
Walk in life, it's everything. It's amazing.
Right, exactly.
So I remember seeing a lunar lander on display at the museum, and it struck me. It looked so fragile. It looked like I could poke my finger through the aluminum or gold foil covering. When you were flying the space shuttle, did it feel secure, or did you feel like you were riding an enormous bottle rocket into the sky?
No, the shuttle is definitely more secure than that lunar lander. It was made of aluminum, and it was a pretty tough thing. Plus, the crew is in the crew compartment, which was even more reinforced aluminum. And it's not like a Navy battleship with thick steel, because you can't have anything that heavy. But it was the shuttle was a pretty solid spacecraft.
Tell me about the first time you experienced weightlessness. Was it what you thought it would be, or was it a little different?
Well, the first time I experienced it was in an airplane. So just as a Cessna pilot or as a F-16 pilot, I used to push forward and you get a little bit of weightlessness. And then NASA has this thing called the Vomit Comet. I got a chapter in How to Astronaut about the Vomit Comet. Your first taste of weightlessness is the name of the chapter. And it's a big airliner, pulls up, pushes over, and you get about 20 seconds of weightlessness. The movie Apollo 13 was filmed in an airplane like that. And it was awesome, and also like, because it was up and down and up and down. It's in a hot, humid Houston day, and you're in a 1960s smelly Boeing 707. But in space, the biggest thing that overwhelmed me, besides floating and your brain's going, what the heck just happened? Who turned off gravity? Is just seeing the Earth. The Earth is so beautiful. It's overwhelming. It really is overwhelming.
Now let's fast forward in time. In addition to commanding the space shuttle, you were also the commander of the International Space Station. Tell me about that experience. How large is it inside? How many people were you up there with? All the details.
So the space station, I've been the co-pilot on the shuttle, but the station is big. It's bigger than a 747 volume wise. There's a bunch of modules, probably roughly 15 modules that we built one at a time. It took over a decade to put them together. The whole interior is covered in wires and equipment and brackets holding things and laptops. So the interior is quite cluttered, and it's sterile. It doesn't have like personality. It's white and blue and metal, and it's a sterile lab environment. Doesn't really
No disco balls hanging from the ceiling.
there should be, but there's not. Every once in a while you bring up something. I put an Air Force banner, when I was commander, but there's not a lot of personality. But it's okay. It's nice. It's comfortable. The temperature is comfortable. There's lights. The lights are the fluorescent kind of lights, so they're not exactly natural lights. And then there's not a lot of windows. The Russians have windows. The Russians understand psychology. They put a lot of windows. The American segment has one big, beautiful window that has all these layers of blockage, and they make it really difficult to use it because they want to keep it pristine and not scratched or anything. But there's one module, I brought it up on my flight, called the Cupola. It has 7 windows, and it is just spectacular. It's the coolest place on Earth. I published a National Geographic photography book, and all the pictures I took for that were taken from the Cupola. It's the coolest place in the world. So that's the space station. There's normally 6 people who live there.
So it seems every month now, thanks to the smartphone, there's new footage of a pilot or a civilian videotaping a UFO somewhere on Earth. Mm-hmm. Did you ever see anything up there while you were in space?
I didn't. There's a good YouTube video though of me blocking a UFO. This UFO flies by and I put my hand up to block it so the camera can't see it. Of course, it's silly. It's one of these conspiracy theory websites. But there's the guys talking and I'm doing a spacewalk and like I move my hand. There's a flash and I move my hand, and anyway, it's just funny. But no, I didn't see anything. But you're right. There have been a lot of pilots. There was just one this week I saw, or last week. 60-year-old pilot or an older pilot saw this thing going from 30,000 to 0 feet up and down. So yeah, those have been reported, but not when I was in space. I didn't see anything. I do have a chapter on aliens though.
Nice. So it seems that the government is now more willing than ever to disclose video footage of sightings.
Right.
What do you attribute that to? Are we just living in a new, more transparent era?
Well, part of it is it's hard to cover up anything. I mean, people say, well, what do you think about the moon? Or why don't you see any stars? Or it's the same arguments that we didn't land on the moon. And my answer is, so A, of course we landed on the moon. B, we have satellites in orbit around the moon that are taking pictures of the Apollo landers and the footprints. But C, the most powerful argument there is you can't cover anything up. Oh yeah, NASA got 400,000 people to keep their mouth shut. And the Soviets were tracking it. The Soviets saw the Saturn V leave Earth and go to the moon with their radars and stuff. So, I mean, Bill Clinton couldn't cover up Monica Lewinsky. So how does NASA cover up Apollo, right? It's so, the reality is if you're working in the government, you have to have a plan to just own it, because it's going to be impossible to cover anything up.
So astronaut Rick Searfoss used to work with me, and I was always very aware of the extraordinary level of professionalism he brought to everything we did. Mm-hmm. Then I quickly realized that most astronauts are really serious perfectionists, and I really appreciate that especially when we're working on something, a very difficult goal to achieve. Did you know Rick? Did you ever work with him?
I knew Rick just briefly. I had done an exchange at the French Air Force Academy when I was a cadet at the Air Force Academy. And he had done that same exchange, a decade before me or so years before me. So we had that in common. But his career ended just as mine began. So we really didn't overlap in the astronaut office.
What do you think about Elon Musk's desire to put astronauts on Mars? Do you think his time frame is realistic? What do you think about that initiative in general?
Yeah, the time that I've seen is like the next couple years. Is that what you've heard? Is that the latest?
4 to 5 years.
Yeah. The problem. So I've also seen that he wants to send 100 people in one of these rockets. I can tell you that 6 people eat a lot of food and they need a lot of underwear and they need a lot of water. And, so 100 people are going to need 16 times as much. And a bottle of water, this is half liter. So this is about a pound. This is tens of thousands of dollars, maybe 20, 30, $40,000 into low Earth orbit. And that's with the new and improved and cheaper SpaceX prices. To send that to Mars, you have to add a zero and then some. So you can go on Wikipedia and look at the Mars rovers and how much it cost and how heavy they are. It's about $1 million a pound to the surface of Mars. So you add up 100 people plus all the oxygen and all the water that they're going to need. And it just becomes prohibitively expensive. And plus the current technology, this chemical rocket technology, is about a 3-year round trip. And if you had electric propulsion, which requires nuclear power, you could get there back in a year. So I think I got it. There's a chapter about how to get to Mars, the stuff we need to do. So I don't think we're ready yet. I think those technologies need to be developed in space propulsion and some better life support equipment.
So apparently there has been an unknown man flying around LAX airport in a jetpack over the last few months. I don't know if you've heard it or
I saw an article. Yeah.
Did you ever have a desire to fly a jetpack or jet suit like Eve?
Oh yeah, I'd love that. I just saw an article yesterday. The Royal Navy has these special ops guys, and they had 2 boats driving in formation, and these little jetpack dudes took off, and they were like, it's how to board another ship quicker. They flew over to the other ship and then were landing on it. It was really cool.
Yeah.
I would love to do that. I'm actually working with a startup company that's doing unmanned urban air mobility, or manned human urban air mobility. So basically flying drones, flying cars kind of things.
Propellers or jets?
Propellers, yeah. It's electric powered propellers.
I still think that the greatest scene in any Bond movie is the scene with Sean Connery putting the jetpack on and flying away. That's still the greatest. So now that you've retired as an astronaut, I understand you're pursuing a career as a movie and documentary producer. Can you tell us about that?
So while I was in space, I had an opportunity to help make a movie called A Beautiful Planet. It's an IMAX film. Toni Myers was our director. It was her last film. And she was really my inspiration. She taught me how to be a filmmaker. James Nyhouse was our director of photography, and he taught me how to shoot a film in space. In fact, tonight I'm teaching at the USC Film School. They're in their IMAX class. I'm a guest lecturer at the USC Film School for IMAX.
Nice.
And so I fell in love with it. And when I was deciding, do I stay at NASA? Do I go? One of the things I wanted to do was make TV and film, because that's how you impact people. That's how people are entertained. That's how they hear stories. So I had an opportunity last year to make a film called One More Orbit. I've got the model of our airplane. We took a Gulfstream and we set a world record flying around the planet. We went over the North Pole and South Pole to set this world record. And but I was originally going to be a pilot, but there was no time for the training. So instead, the guy who put it together said, "Why don't you just make a movie?" So I said, "That's my dream come true." So I made this documentary. It's awesome. It's out in the US and Canada and a few European countries. One More Orbit. And honestly, it's the movie that we need now. It's the 2020 antidote. It's positive, it's exploration, it's how people from different countries can get along. It's a little bit about Apollo, a little bit about climate change and the environment, how we can stop climate change. And so anyway, it was just such a fun project. And I've made some lifelong friends. In fact, we're going to write a book about One More Orbit later this week. I'm going to go to Dubai and sequester myself and write for 2 weeks.
When you circumnavigated the globe, did you go around the poles or around the equator?
Over the North Pole and South Pole.
And how long did that take?
About 46 hours and 40 minutes, a little over 46 hours.
And how much of that was actual airtime as opposed to landing to refuel?
40.
Wow.
5 hours. I mean, we each of the stop. Well, you'll see that. I don't want to spoil the film.
All right.
But there probably 44 of that was flying, maybe 45 something. The way you set that record is by having really fast ground stops. Because once you're airborne, there's only so much you can't speed up that much. You're just going to go max speed. So the way you make up time is by having your ground stops go really fast. And the jet was owned by Qatar Executive, part of Qatar Airways. And they had an amazing crew. They sent their crew to each of the fuel stops, and they The record would never have happened if it wasn't for them.
Hmm. So, what are some of the new NASA or SpaceX programs or projects that you think will be coming up over the next few years that are going to be really exciting?
I think the mission to Jupiter is going to be amazing. The Europa, the mission. There's an ice moon of Jupiter, and we're going to send a probe there. It's going to be amazing. They're talking about having a lander. It may just be an orbiter, but to go look at this really, really cool moon of Jupiter is going to be amazing. There's talk of sending one to Enceladus. It's one of the moons of Saturn that I think is going to be just spectacular. The James Webb Space Telescope has been a long time in coming, and NASA is going to be really happy when that thing finally launches, hopefully next year. It's going to, look farther back in time than Hubble can, and be able to look through clouds of dust and see things that Hubble can't. And so that telescope is going to be exciting. I think the NASA's unmanned missions are some of the most exciting. They've got a Mars sample return mission. It's going to be super complicated. It's like 100 miracles need to happen for this mission to work. But if it does, that'll be cool. We'll actually get dirt back from Mars, which will be amazing. We've gotten that from the moon, but we haven't got, and hopefully we'll get it back from the asteroid Bennu that just happened last week with the OSIRIS-REx mission, where it did a sample of this asteroid. But we've never had that really from Mars. And so that's going to be amazing if that mission works. A lot of really cool unmanned stuff.
Yeah. Neil Armstrong, when he came back from the moon, first man on the moon, came back, he sat down and he thought, well, what do I do now? Where do I go after this? Did you have that sense, or were you looking forward to working in media so much that it really wasn't an issue for you?
So I was worried because a lot of my colleagues, their career at NASA is over, and now what do you do next? And if you win the World Series, what do you do next? If you win the World Cup, what do you do next? If you win an Oscar, sometimes you get to do it again, sometimes you don't. And so I got to the point, I've been at NASA for 16 years. I was a shuttle pilot. I was a station commander. I'd done spacewalks. I made a movie in space. There was nothing left for me to do. We weren't going to the moon anytime soon. And I didn't want to hang around for another, I was still in my 40s. I didn't want to be in my 50s and now 60s and hanging on for one more flight. So I just said, you know what? I'm young. I'm going to go have a complete switch in my career. And it was risky. I had that government paycheck coming in twice a week for 30 years in the Air Force. And all of a sudden it wasn't. So it was a risky move, but I wanted to do speaking and writing. And so I got one big speech contract came in, and I said, okay, if I can get one, I can get more. And so based on that, I made the decision to leave, and it was great. It was the best move I ever made. So I landed from my mission, 24-hour flight from Kazakhstan back to Houston. I go to the gym, do some rehab. And my son, who had turned 16 and got his driver's license, was at the gym with me. And he said, all right, Dad, let's go car shopping. So I got in the car, he drove, and we went to the Ford dealer to look at pickups. And I looked around and I thought, I'm good. I'm back on Earth. Like, there's the highway, there's NASA Road 1. It was like a switch had been flipped, and I was good. And so I had been worried that I was going to be depressed or miss space or whatever, and I didn't at all. And so that was good.
And I'll tell you what else is really interesting. And I know you try not to look on the negative side of things, but there are people who try to cross the street and they get flattened by a semi. You, on the other hand, went into space for more than 6 months, survived without a scratch. And that's really quite extraordinary when you think about it.
We have a saying in the F-16 community as a fighter pilot, I'd rather be lucky than good. So some of that is required when it comes to the astronaut business.
So before we wrap things up, is there anything else you would like to promote or bring to our attention? Where can people get your book?
Yeah. So the book, How to Astronaut, is super exciting. I love it. It's gotten amazing press, and it's just a way for anybody to learn stuff about space. It's gotten a lot of really positive reviews. I try and support local bookstores. So if you have a local bookseller, get it from there. Any bookstore will get it. Of course, you can get it on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. It's really easy to get. And then the movie One More Orbit, you know, if you want something that besides presidential debates and, you know, COVID death tolls and whatever else, you know, Russian interference, if you want something besides that, check out One More Orbit. It's really great. It's great for kids. We've had a few classrooms watch it, and then I'll come and do Q&A with them. And it's just a cool, fun. It's something a little bit out of the ordinary.
Let me ask you, do the kids that you come in and talk to, do they appreciate what a big deal you are and what you achieved? Because I know if Jay-Z or Beyonce walked in, they'd go crazy.
Yeah.
But
so,
in my opinion, your achievements are far more significant. Do the kids appreciate that?
So here's this kid story. I'm sitting on my couch with my daughter. She's a little girl. It was about 10 years ago when LeBron got famous, and I love sports. So we're watching the NBA finals, and LeBron's about to win his first championship. And I coach her basketball team. She's probably 10 or something. And she looks up at me and she says, "Dad, why can't you be more like LeBron James?"
Oh, that's funny.
This is after my space shuttle flight. I'm like, there's a few really obvious differences. You know, for one, he's from Ohio and I'm from Maryland. And anyway, it was just funny. So kids are great. They're like truth filters. They're unfiltered, bring you back to reality.
Well, it has been a real pleasure having you on the John Ark Show. Congratulations on all your success, and you are always welcome back on the show.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, John. This is fun.
Thank you. Bye-bye.